jump into some stories of yours. Give us some examples from your own life of failure and mistake and things that you're like, oh man, let's not do that again.
Yeah. So, like I told you, I was a little bit of a late bloomer. I've done everything a little bit late. When I moved to Nashville, I wasn't involved in a tech community for nearly a year and a half. I kind of focused in on the Change Healthcare company and didn't get out into the geek socials and that on purpose. So early in my career, when I first was getting out of college, my parents were very entrepreneurial. They owned a couple of hardware manufacturing companies. They built trees and cans and garden products and stuff like that. And the company was large enough where they needed help on the hardware side, the computer IT hardware side. So they bought a company locally to our town that did infrastructure, IT, computer repairs, internet, networking, and stuff like that. And they basically, right out of college, let me go to work for this company. Now, they changed the branding, they changed the logo, they hired a couple of salesmen, and then they threw me in there. And I wasn't necessarily the boss, but I was kind of the guy that was in charge because I was the boss's son.
Yeah.
The downfall of where I went to school was it was a great program, but what they taught me was how to use programs. My background is in technical graphics or computer graphics out of the School of Engineering. So I knew how to use all these animation programs and Photoshop and Illustrator really well, but they didn't teach me how to make business decisions. They didn't teach me how to do small business management or how to do financial tables or how to motivate salesmen, none of this. So probably the biggest failure or the most dominant failure in my mind came from this first company where my parents threw me into it and said, go in this company.
Yeah.
It only lasted about 6 months when I realized the sales guys were sitting around. They didn't know what to do. The guys that were doing the same work when they bought the company, were doing less of it because someone else's name was on the company now. They didn't have to foot the bill. And I remember it's probably the most vivid memory I have from my entire childhood was, taking my dad to lunch one day and pulling into a parking lot afterwards and thinking I was going to throw up, and man to man having to look him in the eyes and say, Dad, this thing is not working. It was a very traumatic experience for me because, I had done freelancing through college and I, put together a good living for myself up until that point and decided to work for this company. And I knew he had put a lot of thought into getting me into this company. And, I did not want to let him down, but I had to tell him that this thing was not working. And I think he expected it, which is what was awesome. I think they put that out there because they needed the company. They were going to get the work done either way. And regardless of how successful I was at what I was doing, they knew a entrepreneurial, management type position for me. So I'm sure they're sad it failed. They sold it off shortly after that and just hired the guys to work for them directly, which is, I think, what the cost was they were trying to avoid. But it was of all the memories I have, I did sports in school, and I was active in the church and all these things. I have very little memories of them. I like to tell my wife I have a 3-year RAM chip in my head. So after 3 years, I lose all the memories from my brain because so much is going on. But of all my childhood memories, that's probably one of the most, most prominent in my brain because it scarred me as an entrepreneur for life. But it also was very telling of how passionate I was about creating these businesses and not letting people down and finding solutions. And it's really guided my life since that point.
Okay. So you, that scar that you speak of, what exactly did, I guess, how did that play out in other entrepreneurial endeavors and that you remembered it so well that you go back and apply that to what you do now or things past
yes.
that?
Definitely. I mean, that was more than 10 years ago now. And so obviously that's a really predominant memory I have. But every company I've started since then, I started a consulting company, a t-shirt business, a podcasting company. I moved from Indiana to Chicago to San Francisco to Nashville with all these different companies and these different ideas. And that was the one thing I always kept in my mind was, it hurts a lot to break up with your first girlfriend. It hurts a lot to let your parents down when you respect them as much as I respected my parents. And it hurts to be a failure at business. But through all these things, there's an opportunity. And even all the way back to the girlfriend level, you know, there's other fish in the sea.
Yeah.
It is a real thing. But from an entrepreneur's standpoint, the first girlfriend was a failure. The second one was a success.
Yeah.
And the same thing applies to business, you know.